Hello and welcome to another episode of LowEndBox TV. This is part 3 of our series on creating a highly available WordPress site from scratch. If you're interested in exactly what we're trying to accomplish, I would start at video number 1 in this series, which will show you a diagram of what we mean by highly available WordPress. In a nutshell, we're going to have multi-master replication with MySQL, and we're going to have DRBD doing a file system, or I should say actually a block level replication for images and other assets that we upload, themes, etc. And then we will have round-robin DNS from the client side. Today what we're working on is setting up the multi-master replication. Now I'm going to say at the outset here, there's a lot of commands to type, and they're very unforgiving in the sense that you've got to type them correctly, and it's really easy to make a mistake and put the wrong IP address in. So if you are following along and you get into trouble, just double check your commands. Make sure you put the right IP address. You haven't transposed something, or you haven't mixed up a number or something. It's just kind of one of those things that when you're working at the database level that you run into. So here I am, I'm logged into Node 1. As you may recall from our previous video, we're going to be making the site www.lowend.party highly available, and we've got Node 1 and Node 2.lowend.party. So I've got, let's see here, we should see MySQL up and running, there it is. And of course this actually is MariaDB, which we installed in video number 1. It's Maria 10.3. Okay, so let's go over here to etc MySQL maria.conf.d, and I'm going to create a file in here called replication.cnf, and all of these files, these .cnf files, are sourced as part of the MariaDB configuration. And I'm going to create in this file, I'm going to create a section under MySQL D, and we're going to put in a few parameters here. Log bin means use binary logs. Server ID is 1. Bind address, and this is a key. We're going to put in the local IP address. So if I go IP address, I can see that is my IP address here on Node 1, and that's what I put in here. So I put, oops, that's Node 2. All right, then I'm going to say auto increment equals 2, auto increment offset equals 1, and those are used for keys. I can see I've already introduced a typo here, bind address. There we go, 2 S's. So that's the configuration here of replication.cnf on Node 1. Let's just double check things. Log bin, server ID is 1, bind address, that's the correct address, auto increment, auto increment offset, that all looks good. Now you might ask yourself, why is it server underscore ID? And yet the other parameters are dash, like bind dash address. Why isn't it bind underscore address or server dash ID? Who knows? That's above my pay grade, as they say. All right, let's go now to Node 2. And we're going to create a similar file here. Let's see, MySQL MariaDB confd replication.cnf. And in fact, what I can do is go over here and let's just cat replication CNF, and I can just copy that over, because the only thing I need to change is the bind address. And my IP address on Node 2 here is this 23, there we go, 23.239.740. So that's the only thing I need to do is just change that address. And I want my, there's one other thing I need to do, and that is to change the auto increment offset. It was 1 on the other host, 2 on this host, and there is one other thing I need to change. I also need to change the server ID. I guess there's a little bit more to change than I thought. So the differences here, we can flip back and forth so you can see. I've got a different server ID, different bind address, and a different auto increment offset. So one useful thing to do is to set your auto increment offset to the same number as your server ID. That's just a little trick that's out there. I'm not going to get into how auto increment works. You can look that up in the MariaDB manuals if you want, but essentially that's for things like auto increment fields. This is going to set so that you don't have the same auto increment number on both nodes, right? Each node will have a different sequence of numbers that it creates. So I've copied the file in, I've changed, or I should say I've updated the server ID, the bind address, and the auto increment offset, so I'm good to go there on node 2. And now I just need to restart restart MySQL on both nodes. Before we continue, I'd like to highlight one of our community advertisers. ServerMania provides a wide range of hosting services, including dedicated servers, cloud servers, hybrid servers, 10 gigabit per second unmetered servers, co-location, cloud backup, and more. They have specialized solutions for media streaming, game servers, storage servers, and many other needs. They're a Canadian company whose slogan is Hosting Empowered, and they offer services in 8 state-of-the-art data centers across North America, Europe, and New Zealand. If you're looking for hosting, check out ServerMania's offers on LowEndTalk and LowEndBox, or visit them at servermania.com. Restart MySQL. There we go. Now we're going to get into the actual configuration of the multi-master. And what I mean by multi-master is that whatever I implement, or whatever insert, that's the word I was looking for, insert, update, change, delete on one node, those changes are replicated and reflected on the other node. And it's bidirectional. So node 1 updates node 2 can update node 1. There are other configurations possible. You could have a primary node and a slave node, and that's a one-way updating. You could have multiple slave nodes if you want. You could have one master, multiple slaves. You could have one master, one slave, that unidirectional replication, or you can have, in this case, multi-master. And there's still even more advanced configurations, which we won't get into, but there's a lot of flexibility with this system. So I'm back on node 1 here, and I'm just going to connect to MySQL. And we're going to say create user master at %, that's the wildcard. So it's the user master at any host, identified by, and we're going to say complex password. Feel free to put in an actual good password there, right? Okay. Now we're going to grant replication slave on every database, every object in that database, to master at everywhere. That looks good. Flush privileges, that kind of makes all that live. And then we're going to flush tables with read lock. We're not going to exit the session though. We're going to keep this session open, and we're going to say show master status. All right, now don't exit out of this session. Keep that session open. But here's the important point that we want to get out of this. This is the file. This is our binary file, and this is the position. And position you can think of as kind of the serial number for the last change. Some other database architectures would call this like a system change number or something like that. So position 794. Now let's go back over to node 2. Go to MySQL. And node 2, we're going to create user master at anywhere, identified by complex password. All right, grant replication slave. No, a grant replication slave on every database, every object to master at %. By the way, you could use a different name other than master. Just to keep it simple, I'm kind of using the textbook names, but now I want to flush privileges. All right, now we're going to stop slave. And let's now do, this is the tricky part here. We're going to say change master to master host, and I'm going to put in the IP address not for node 2, but for node 1, because node 1 is the master in this replication setup. You'll see what I mean. Master user equals master, oops, comma, master password equals complex password, master log file equals, and now what I can do is copy this file name. That's what I want to do here. Paste that in. Master log pos, which is short for position, equals, and over here we saw that it is 794, so we'll just bring that over. And then this parameter is optional, but I like to use it. Master heartbeat period equals 60. That means that even if there's no traffic flowing back and forth, in other words, the databases are idle, there's no updates or whatever going back and forth, it will still send just a ping, kind of a heartbeat, every 60 seconds just to make sure that the connection is up and working fine. All right, so let's commit that, and then we will start slave. Now, we're going to do a show slave status, and I'm going to put this G at the end. What that does, that \G, is it kind of takes the table and flips it on its side. If I do this without that G, I get this, it's trying to print out this incredibly long, or I should say incredibly wide table, because it has many, many columns. But if I do show slave status, try to say that 6 times fast, with a \G, it prints it out in this much easier to read format. Now what I want to do here is look through this, and what I'm looking to see is slave IO running. That should be saying yes, and slave SQL running should be saying yes. That's good. That means that things are working properly. If if I did not see that, I would look at, there should be something here. Let's see, a last IO error. It would actually have an error message there, or last SQL error here. That would tell me what the SQL error is, or I could go look at varlog MySQL error.log for information. 99.9% of the time what's happened is that in this very long command here, you've typed something incorrectly, or you've forgot to stop the slave first and then restart it, or something like that. But that is the configuration on slave 2, or sorry, node 2. Now I want to go over, let's do a show master status as well. Yep, okay, so that's saying that, hey, I went and talked to the master, which for this replication relationship is node 1, and that's where it's at. Okay, so everything looks like it's going well. Let's go over here to node 1, and now I can unlock tables. And the reason I locked them, I did this flush tables with read lock, is I didn't want this position to be changing while we were setting up that replication status. Okay, but now I'm done kind of setting that up, so or I should say that replication relationship. Now that I've got that set up and running, I'm going to unlock tables, and I need to set up the other master-slave relationship going the other way. So we can stop slave, and we'll say change master to, this is going to look like a very familiar command, just everything's going to be a little bit backwards. So master host for this guy is 23.239.7.40. Master user equals master password equals complex password. Master log file equals that. Because now it's going to be the same on both sides, so I don't have to go look it up on the other side. Master log pos equals 794. Master heartbeat period equals 60. And then I can start slave and do a show slave status with that G. And I want to see my, yep, we're looking good. Slave IO running is yes. slave SQL running is yes. I've got nothing here under my last IO error, last SQL error, so we are looking good. So let's test it out. I'm on node 1, so I'm going to connect to the WP database. I could actually create a new database because we're replicating everything, but we'll just use this WP database. I'm just going to create a table. We'll call this create table replication test, and we'll give it a couple columns. We'll say ID integer, name varchar 30. And we will insert into REPL test ID name, values. We'll use the Avengers here. So Avenger number 1 will be Thor. Avenger number 2 will be Captain America. And Avenger number 3 we will make, let's do Iron Man. Boom, commit, and we are done. Now if I go over to node 2 here, I will need to I need to connect to the WP database first. And let's do a select star from REPL test. Boom! So the table that was on node 1 has been replicated perfectly across to node 2. And let's do it in the other way to make sure that node 2 is properly replicating to node 1. Let's create table REPL test 2. ID integer, name varchar 30. Let's see here. Let's insert into REPL test 2 ID name, values. I'm going to date myself here as a Marvel Comics reader because in the comics, Thor's secret identity was Dr. Donald Blake, which did not make it into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So if you've read the comics, you'll recognize that name, but if you are just a Marvel Cinematic Universe, you'll be saying, who's Donald Blake? Now, let's put in a couple more. We'll say 2, of course, for Captain America, that is Steve Rogers, and for Iron Man, it is Tony Stark. And commit. Now if I go over here to, in fact also, let's do this. Let's go and select star from REPL test. Let's delete from REPL test where ID equals 3. We will. Sorry, Tony Stark, we just, or Iron Man, we just fired you. So on this database, REPL test is those, and REPL test 2 is that. All right, so let's go over here and see what we've got. Select star from REPL test. Yep, it did process that delete correctly. If I go to REPL test 2, there we go. So it looks like we have multi-master bidirectional replication working perfectly. So we've now solved the database to database replication need that we have for our setup. Now, if we had something, just kind of a point of philosophy here, if we had only one author, we could perhaps just have him or her editing on node 1 and replicating everything over, like even with like rsync, to node 2. Because all the content, the posts, stuff such as include this image, in the text of the post, or whatever, all that information is at the database. The only thing that we have to copy over is the media, that the images and whatever. So we could certainly work at that level. That's kind of a quick and dirty way to do it. But in this case, we're going to go for the gold, kind of the gold version, and we're going to set up DRBD, which is a block level replication that will allow us to not have to worry about doing anything manually. We'll just be able to update one node or update 2 nodes, and they'll keep in perfect sync. All right, so that's it for this time. Next time, we will be setting up DRBD. In the meantime, I'd like to invite you to visit us at LowEndBox or LowEndTalk.com, where we've got fantastic technical content, by far the best deals in the hosting industry, thoughts and opinions from industry leaders, and some spirited discussion. Until next time, happy hosting.